This week, as China ramps up EV manufacturing and innovation, some are calling this the Sputnik moment. Instead of responding with American innovation, Biden has introduced a 100% tariff on imported Chinese EVs. I guess by Sputnik moment, they mean the moment the Sputnik fell out of the sky and burned up on re-entry.
Federal regulators in the U.S. have decreed that utilities must now make plans for 20 years into the future. In solidarity, James and I will now plan our podcast 20 years into the future. It's not difficult because we plan to be dead.
Trump asks top oil executives for $1 billion in donations in exchange for environment policy rollbacks. I'd give him $1 billion to stop painting himself orange and wear a wig.
Restaurants in California are fighting back against regulations that require the phase-out of natural gas cooking. This is the same group that opposed the smoking ban in restaurants because everyone knows that fine dining and poor air quality go hand in hand.
All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
Is it summer or is it, what do we call it now?
Smoke 'em season.
Smoke 'em if you got 'em. Yeah, it's just the middle of May and it's been an early start to the forest fire season here in Canada. They've been burning for a while now, but we finally got our first taste of it. Starts to warm up, starts to become like spring, like summer. And what do you know? The forest fire smoke blows in. You got to close all your windows, and it's ruining summer. It's terrible.
In weather news, the sun has ejected a bunch of stuff at the Earth and created spectacular northern lights.
Yeah, some fantastic photography opportunities, if nothing else. Some issues for the grid, I suppose.
Yeah, they
it's
kept talking about the
electromagnetic.
grid threat, didn't they, in the news?
Yeah.
But nothing happened.
It sounds like nothing happened, but this is, I guess, a kind of electromagnetic radiation, so it has the potential to really screw around with our grid. So, I don't know. Nothing happened, but it's a worry.
Yeah. Last time this happened this badly was 2003, but I guess there are examples in history of the grid actually being affected by these things. Did you get out and look at the northern lights at all?
No, if I'd had some warning, but, I'm asleep way too early. So, there's supposed to be sort of predictions for this, right? Like somebody should have warned me.
There was predictions. They talked
about
it.
Well, you should have warned me then.
They get like a 2-day notice, Brian, between the sun and when it gets here.
Next time this happens, you let me know, okay?
Okay, so I went out with my daughter. My son and wife were supposed to come too, but my wife wasn't feeling well, and my son went out with some friends and did his own thing.
And this is Aurora Borealis, if we haven't mentioned
Northern
it.
Lights, if you will. And, these went all the way down to Florida and southern New Mexico. I was looking at the Chevy Bolt Facebook page, and somebody posted a picture of their Bolt against the northern lights in southern New Mexico, which is essentially Mexico, if you look at the map. Remember in the 80s or 90s, there was we were watching Detroit TV, and they had this warning of it's not spaceships, it's the northern lights, because Detroit didn't get the northern lights very often. Well, I wonder what the Floridians thought. Because they did have a warning, and even Brian, you, an educated man who goes to bed early, didn't know about it. Well, I imagine there's a lot of people who thought it was space aliens. Anyway, it was freaking spectacular. And we went north of the city, my daughter and I, and there was a guy on the highway walking, and he wasn't looking for the northern lights. He was just a Friday night drunk guy walking on the highway, and that was scary. And then we turned around, and we were looking for him so that we didn't miss him. We didn't hit him on the way back. And he crossed right in front of us when we were looking on the side of the road. And then there was another guy on another highway. Anyway, we were coming back to the city because it was cloudy up there and nothing much was going on. We saw a bit of northern lights peeking between the clouds. I was looking at my satellite view of the weather, so I decided to go in a completely different direction. So I come back to the city and go on a different highway towards Regina Beach, and we got clear skies there. But on the way back at 11 o'clock, there was a constant stream of traffic coming out of the city. Constant. It was like, 6 Taylor Swift concerts had let out or something. It was constant. And I've never seen anything like that. Back in 90, I want to say 4-ish, there was this big Perseid meteor shower, which was supposed to be spectacular. And I went out, and it was like 6 degrees in August. It was very cold Celsius. Very, very cold. And for some reason, this huge thing streaked across the sky and left a tail glowing. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And you heard all these oohs and ahs from all around you. You didn't realize all these people were out on the countryside parked on the gravel roads, but they were. Well, this was the same thing. They were everywhere. Except, you know, the northern lights aren't sudden, so you don't hear oohs and ahs, but you could hear people talking. You know, you think you're in the middle of nowhere and you hear somebody talking. Oh, there's somebody down there in the darkness, you know, 200 yards away on the gravel road. So, yeah, I'd seen some pretty spectacular northern lights back when I was a young man who, you know, was in cars, spent a lot of time in cars when I was young, and saw some pretty cool things. Including dancing lights that seem to be right over your head, including, you know, the illusion of sound coming from them, which is something, a phenomenon that happens.
I have seen it a couple of times, yeah.
These weren't dancing, but they had colors that I had never seen before. I'd never seen red, massive purple and reds, and usually your standard Aurora Borealis around here is green. And I used to see them all the time, but they built up sort of the industrial section of the city, north of the city, in the rural municipality. They've got all these businesses there that have these ridiculously bright lights, unnecessarily bright LED lights. So that's gone. That part of nature is taken away from me. And yeah, so, but you know what takes away from that nature is smoke. Smoke takes away from the night sky. Because on Saturday we went out again because we were hooked, and there was supposed to be more on Saturday. There was, but it was just green. But you know, the smoke takes that away. I had some cool photography going on. Got some really good pictures with the new camera from the Clean Energy Show here that is modern and does things that, you know, last time I did it, Brian, I think I was doing 30-second exposures to get the northern lights. So they move in that time. They're not, it's not a capture. Now I'm down to like 1, 2, 3 seconds. It's ridiculous because they're so sensitive now. The cameras are so sensitive, and I have a much better lens, which lets in more light. And it was just very cool. And my daughter went from starting the day depressed, most depressed I've ever seen her, to being annoyingly giddy. Like, you know, she was ridiculously giddy that night, and she wants to keep doing this. So we're going to keep doing this. We're going to go take pictures of things.
Yeah. Have you posted any of those on Twitter or anything?
I have, yes.
Okay, I will go and have a look.
Even the Clean Energy Show Facebook page. No, we don't have a Facebook page, but the Clean Energy Show, on some of our channels I posted things.
Oh, great.
1 or 2 pictures. And I did a time lapse, my first Aurora time lapse. And I wasn't even sure if it was working. It was all in camera. They have great settings for just making it happen. And wow, that was really cool. Like, I just blew my mind when you first watch it and realize that what it's recorded, although it used all my battery. So that's an issue. It did use the battery's not great in the camera, but I think I have an external power supply that I might bring along next time to do that.
Yeah.
Very cool stuff. Yeah, they say, you know, I regret that my partner didn't make it out because could be once in a lifetime, literally. Like, these don't happen all the time. Next time it could be cloudy. Next time I could be in the hospital, you know, or in the old folks' home, or in a morgue, more likely. So yeah, it was pretty cool to see that. And yeah, it's nature, and it's obscured from climate change, because anything else that happens this summer, we're at a peak, Brian. I think it's 13 years, 9, is it 9 or 13 years? There's it's sort of a cycle of the sun activity, and we're at the peak of the sun. So there could be some more stuff flying our way yet.
Like when the cicadas come out, it's on the same schedule.
It might be the same schedule. I don't know. They might have synced up. This is from IndieWire. I don't think I've quoted the news site IndieWire, which is a film, movie, a little bit of TV show blog. Alison Bechdel, the Bechdel test, which we haven't talked about before probably, or even in conversation away from the show for a long time, but it's something that used to be discussed a lot. She came up with the comic strip premise for the Bechdel test in '85, identifying the lack of female representation in movies and TV shows in which two women don't even speak to one another, and if they do, it's about a man. So it's amazing, actually, if you looked at how many movies actually pass the test, which is not very hard. Having two women have a conversation on screen that's not about a male character. So the nonprofit organization Good Energy is launching what it's calling the Climate Reality Check. So it's taking the Bechdel test to climate in movies, essentially, and is introducing criteria for a Bechdel-type climate test. To pass this test, they say a story in a movie must demonstrate two things: climate change exists and a character knows it. And Alison Bechdel endorsed this. She endorsed it on Twitter, so she's still around, and the writer of the story and the people who are doing this were thrilled by that. In evil news, Trump has asked top oil executives for $1 billion in campaign cash in exchange, I can't believe I'm reading this, for environmental policy rollbacks.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be leading in the polls. I don't understand what is wrong with America and Canada.
Yeah, well, perhaps our American listeners can tell us. But
I don't understand. In my day, you couldn't make a $1 billion bribe announcement and get elected, and you couldn't be in court 6 times charged with crimes. I don't understand. I'm going to leave it there. I don't understand. So he recently hosted a high-stakes dinner at the Mar-a-Lago Club, and the Mar-a-Lago estate was made by a serial person.
I watched the Jerry Seinfeld movie as well, yeah.
You have such high standards for movies. How could you watch a lowbrow Pop-Tart movie from Jerry Seinfeld?
It was definitely not great, but one of the complaints I have about comedy movies is that there's usually not enough jokes in them.
This was wall-to-wall jokes. This was the point of the movie was a frame, a canvas to put jokes on, really.
Yeah. So even if they didn't all land, I do appreciate a movie that's wall-to-wall jokes, because that's really hard to do.
Yeah, you have to lower your expectations and just, I thought kids might enjoy it too. I don't know for sure because I don't really have kids that are that young, but it seems like something that they would like. And it was star-studded. There was all kinds of cameos from all kinds of people. So last month, Trump, he asked for $1 billion in contributions from for his re-election campaign, and in return, he pledged to dismantle the environmental policies. So that's just... Brian, I hope he doesn't win. Let's get on with the show, though.
Yeah, so from Electrek, this is about FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in the U.S., and they have now decreed that utilities must have a 20-year plan in place in terms of managing their grids. So as we've said many times, a lot of people complain we can't switch to EVs because it'll crash the grid. And of course, that's not true, but you do have to plan. You do have to upgrade the grid. And I think over the last 100 years, the increase in electricity usage has probably been pretty slow and steady, but, it's about to really crank up. And, my own home is a perfect example of what's basically going to happen to everybody, to every house, to every city, to every apartment building, is that, electricity use is going to roughly triple. And I would say that that's probably what's happened here in my house. I got rid of the natural gas furnace. I put in an air source heat pump, electric heat. I have 2 electric cars, and I had to increase from 100 amp service into the house to 200 amp service. So, all this cost a lot of money, and it basically has tripled my electricity use. And, this is going to play out. And there were no rules in place prior to this about utilities having to plan. Now, I'm assuming the smart ones, have already had 10, 20-year plans in their future. But now this is a federal regulation in the U.S. It's order number 1920. And there are specific requirements for transmission providers in the lower 47 states, excludes Texas because they have their own grid. So 47 states must have long-term planning for regional transmission facilities and have a plan for how to pay for them. And this is going to be on a 20-year time horizon. And there's a nice quote here. Over the last dozen years, FERC has worked on 5 after-action reports on lessons learned from extreme weather events that cause outages that cost hundreds of lives and millions of dollars. We must get beyond these after-action reports and start planning to maintain a reliable grid that powers our entire way of life. So amongst, yes, increase in electricity usage, but an increase in extreme weather events. And this is causing power outages. And the really bad ones, people can lose their lives in the really bad power outages. So, yeah, this is it's a different world. You know, the energy system is not what it was 100 years ago. And this is just a start, but it seems to make sense to, have better plans in place for grid expansion.
Well, some people might be wondering, why is electricity needing to go up? Well, there's a little bit of data centers in there for AI and things like that, but also we're switching to electricity for heating, which has generally been inefficient. Some people do it, if you have a little space heater or something like that, that's it's more than natural gas or other things. So we use heat pumps, which is moving heat instead of creating it. So that's 3 times more efficient than electric heating. And, it's just electric vehicles. All this stuff is energy that is switching from fossil fuels to electricity, which can be fossil fuels, but it can also be completely renewables. And that's the idea, is to switch to cheaper, cleaner, expanding renewables like solar, wind, and backed up by batteries.
Yeah, just imagine how much electricity YouTube uses. Like, just think of all the servers that Google's got going for YouTube. They still have unlimited uploads on YouTube. It's like thousands of hours go up every single day. It's crazy.
And this show will be going too, Brian. This show will be added.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because it's free. Like, why not do it? So, yeah, many, many reasons. But electricity use, oh man, it's going to be insane, but it can be clean if we plan right.
And I keep finding ways to use more electricity in the house. Like, there's always something, Like my pool uses electricity for a 1 horsepower pump that's like 1,000 watts constantly, almost constantly,
yeah,
at least through the day. And there's just little devices and things. I got all these Alexas and Google bots all over the place. One day I'll have a robot powered by electricity, I'm hoping.
But my natural gas bill is eventually going to zero. The next step, after they get the heat pump fixed, they're going to add this auxiliary preheater for hot water. So I still have a natural gas hot water heater, but in the next couple of months, the plan is to switch that out. So then I'll be using electricity for my water as well. So my bill's going to be going up even a little bit more.
So our electricity bill, like some of our utility bills here, because our climate varies, it's very cold in the winter, very warm in the summer where we are. Our electricity bills can be rounded up to an average, and you just pay that per month. So you're paying for the winter so that the bill is the same in the summer, and you don't get this huge...
Yeah, equalized payments.
Payments. And we got a shocking notice that we owed $900 because we bought an EV. So that was like $50 a month and more than usual. Now, that's not just for the EV, though, because the extra EV, because last summer was Smokey and we had to use the air conditioning instead of opening the windows. So our air conditioning, I haven't figured out exactly how much, and I will, and I'll get back to our listeners on that. But I suspect the EV bill is closer to $40 a month, where it was, $120 for a Prius before. So it's actually quite small.
Yeah, still lower than a gasoline bill, but it does pump up your...
But yeah, climate change is making me use more electricity for the air conditioning. You're going to do that too. When you get your heat pump going, it's going to also cool the house and use electricity to do that. And on days when maybe you wouldn't use it, maybe you just open the windows and let the cool prairie air from our relatively high altitude here. It's dry air. Gets pretty cool at night usually.
I was very good at keeping the house cool without air conditioning. You keep the windows closed during the day, you open them up after supper time, cool down the house with the cool night air, close them up again in the morning. Yep. There was only, a couple of days a year where that didn't work.
I was doing that. And the uptake of that is you get fresh air, which is really nice. I really enjoy fresh air. Really.
I remember you...
Go ahead.
You told me once you had an apartment where you had 2 windows and you put a box fan in each window, one sucking, one blowing, and you just exchanged the air quickly.
Yeah, I did what I could. I did what I could because it was a middle floor apartment and it got hot. And I blew and sucked and it worked wonderfully.
We begin with tensions rising potentially between the U.S. and China, with a red headline just crossing the Bloomberg terminal. President Biden is imposing sweeping tariffs on China. Let's get the details now from Bloomberg's Steve Potusk in Washington.
In an election year move, the president is hiking tariffs on a wide range of Chinese imports, including semiconductor chips, batteries, solar cells, and critical minerals. The White House says the changes are projected to affect around $18 billion in current annual imports.
So, if you had a $1,000 EV from China, or $10,000, or $20,000, 25% of that was added on when you imported it into the United States. 25%.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about Chinese EVs. They've made inroads into Europe in places like Australia and New Zealand, but thus far not so much in North America, partly because of these tariffs, which apparently now are increasing.
And Europe has them too, but they're not 100%. They're quadrupling the tariffs for Chinese EVs to 100%. And I have mixed feelings on this. I'm kind of angry because it would be like giving subsidies to fossil fuels because, you know, you want to keep them going. They're subsidizing the American automakers. They're not subsidizing, but they're creating policy to support them when they've screwed up their EV adoption, when the incumbency mindset has screwed them over in the transition to electrified transportation. They've really dropped the ball on it. They've played a good game of pretending that everything is fine, but it's not. I mean, Ford's saying it's losing $100,000 per vehicle. That includes all the research and development that went into it. It doesn't literally mean that their vehicles cost $100,000 more than they're saying, but it's not good for them. And Tesla and BYD in China has shown them the ways. Now, all things being equal, if the planet was important to you, you would let the Chinese vehicles in, at least at a 25% tariff, or, you know, you're going to let them into the country and make the other automakers compete. But the fact is, Brian, if they let the Chinese EV makers in with no tariffs, they would wipe out all the auto industry, all of it. It wouldn't happen overnight, but as people saw cheaper vehicles, like some of these are, you know, significantly cheaper than the U.S. autos. Their manufacturing prowess in China is amazing, and they've got the whole supply chain. The whole minerals and mines are owned by BYD. They make the batteries, so they're just finding efficiencies and doing it very well. They're designed by top world car designers and engineers, so they're not crap anymore. They may have been 10 years ago, but they're not anymore. They're compelling vehicles. In some cases, they're as good and often better, even a little bit better. I'm watching more reviews come in because the Beijing Auto Show just happened, and people were quite amazed by it. There's a lot of ink spilled on that.
Yeah, and we keep waiting for cheaper EVs here in North America, and the prices have been inching down very, very slowly, but there's constantly announcements coming out of China of a $10,000 EV, a $15,000 EV. They are really making it happen.
And, you know, the American and Japanese automakers are not able to really sell sell cars in China, which is, you know, the world's biggest auto market. Not able to do it because they can't compete. The Chinese companies aren't even competing with each other very well. A lot of them are probably going to go bankrupt because there's just such cutthroat, you know, and pricing, and the manufacturing capability is apparently twice of what they're actually doing, so they could supply the world with EVs. South America has taken advantage of these EVs. There's some other countries as well. You know, they could perhaps do a joint venture with American car companies and do them in the United States. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe they'll make a plant here. I don't know, but that doesn't always go well. When there's a documentary on that was quite interesting. So Patrick George from Inside EVs has written something. I'm going to read what he said about it. He said, when the Soviet Union became the first nation to put a man-made satellite into orbit in 1957, the initial response from the United States government was tepid at best. But the general public had a different reaction, one of fear, shock, and urgency that our primary geopolitical rival could technologically be far superior ahead of us. Okay, But the general public had a different reaction, one of fear, shock, and urgency that our primary geopolitical rival could be technologically so far ahead of us. This led to more funding for what we now call STEM education. That is science, technology, engineering, and math. And I'm not good at any of those. Maybe a little bit of technology, but not so much the other stuff. So more R&D for aerospace tech and more public policies meant to drive innovation. That happened in response to Sputnik. It also gave us the term Sputnik moment for when the country has to be jolted into action to catch up with an adversary with such a huge lead, and he feels that that moment is now. They're also putting tariffs on semiconductors, batteries, solar cells, and critical minerals, all of which are pertaining to what we cover on the show.
Yeah, and of course, this is upsetting. This is definitely a Sputnik moment for you and I because we follow this stuff closely, but I still get the feeling that the general public not really following this stuff, so they're not going to be as outraged as they were when the Sputnik went up in 1957. There's a general sense that the cars we've got are fine, I think.
Yeah. Well, it is a balance. I mean, I don't know that I would, get rid of tariffs altogether on Chinese EVs if I was in his position, because you have to go to bed at night and realize that a lot of the American economy, a lot of American jobs rely on that. Some of them listen to our show. So but it's a hard decision. You have to balance that with what we need to do to save the planet from going down a spiral of feedback loops in the climate.
Yeah, and the 25% tariff already seemed to be enough to keep them out, or, the Chinese production. They have enough other countries to worry about that they weren't going to start going to America until they really, had to expand there. So, yeah, keeping it at 25% may have done the job anyway. This just is, I don't know what you'd call it, icing on the cake, something
Sure.
like that. All right, so continuing with news of China. So BYD, the Chinese automaker, they are headquartered in Shenzhen in China. And now they've put out an announcement that Shenzhen is the first city in China to have more fast charging plugs than gas pumps. This is, I'm very surprised to read this. I didn't think that, we were anywhere near. But of course, a lot of the progress in EVs is happening in China, and we don't always see it because we're not there. It's a world away. So there are 362 supercharging stations in Shenzhen. And when you count up the number of plugs versus the number of gas pump connectors, apparently there's more chargers. So this is a big deal. Shenzhen has always been on the leading edge of this kind of stuff. It's a city of 12.5 million people. And way back in 2017, they electrified their bus fleet. They've got 16,000 electric buses, and their taxis were electrified way back in 2019, before we even started this show, James, which is remarkable.
Ancient times. There was ancient times before we started this show. We've been going for so long. It's quite remarkable. Yeah, I guess it's also, a view as to what's going to happen in other places of the world. They're going to catch up. Of course, it's kind of sad right now with the Tesla supercharging situation. We kind of needed them to be a part of the solution. Now I'm waiting for somebody else to start a network. I wish there was a unified network that could do it, because Tesla was doing it way cheaper than everyone else. It's like somewhere between 25 and 70% cheaper they were doing it, depending on the situation. And they're talking about expanding their network now in the same locations. But experts have said time and time again since that announcement that it's actually hardly any cheaper at all to expand on those locations, because you got to put in more infrastructure, more grid connections. They're not expandable. Most of them are not expandable. So that's a bit of an issue. But good to see. And it is, like I said, part of what's going to come in the future. Oh, it's time to dip into the mailbag, as we like to do. This one says, hey guys, I'm in the middle of listening to your last show, Robots That Do Dishes. It's called a dishwasher. LOL. No. That's from Mitchell. No, Mitchell.
No. that doesn't count.
That's great. I mean, I always said that that's the best $100 I ever spent when I was in university was to buy a used portable dishwasher that I put in the trunk of my car and hauled home and eventually gave it to someone who left it outside in the rain. But yeah, it was wonderful to have. To go from zero to have nothing to a dishwasher, huge thing for me. I've got a cousin who has a dishwasher, doesn't know how to use it. Technical nerd guy refuses to learn how to use a dishwasher because he's...
I don't understand those people.
I don't
Doing
understand.
dishes is the worst job on earth.
Yes.
But
to
the
have
second worst
somebody
job
to
is
load it.
loading the...
Yeah, you need a robot to
loading
load
the
it.
dishwasher.
You need a robot to load that sucker. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Without it, it's a huge thing. But, you know, now we want more. We want more. We've got our cake. And our first world problem is, you know, my back's, you know, it hurts. I don't like bending. I don't like bending into the dishwasher. If I could custom make a house, I would make the dishwasher like off the floor so that I wouldn't have to bend.
Yeah, it's true. I have the same problem because when you have a bad back, it's like bending and twisting at the same time is the thing you have to avoid.
Yeah.
And when you're, you know, moving all around loading the dishwasher, that seems to be what you have to do.
Can I get a note from you to explain that to my wife because she's not happy with my participation? Here's another letter. Hi, team. Long-time listener, first-time emailer. We recently moved to the Midwest, but used to live out on the East Coast, and we would have frequent road trips 2 to 3 times a year, about 1,700 kilometers each day, and that made us go for a Toyota RAV4 hybrid when we bought our car at the end of 2019. That's a good car. My sister-in-law has one.
Yep.
I'd like to see the plug-in version because it's got a good range for it when you're not going on those road trips and have an electric car. Plus, it's really well reviewed, but they're also very hard to get. You know, I was looking at Toyota Red Tag days. They're not available. There's no cars available. All have limited inventory, and it's not because of the sale. It's because they're just not making them. I don't know why. He goes on to say, I love the car, but I'm disappointed in Toyota for not believing in EVs. I'm a Toyota fan as well, and I'm disappointed I would love to buy a Toyota EV because I'd know it'd be reliable, and I instead bought a Chevy EV. Now I'm just, you know, gambling on red on the casino and putting everything on red. So I'm saying this is a Toyota driver, albeit on borrowed time. This may be the dumbest ad I've ever seen, and he gives a ad talking about how Toyota has electrified their vehicles. They're electrified vehicles. They're pretending to be electric, and they're not. And, of course, that drives every EV owner crazy.
Yeah, they're putting out these print ads or ads on Facebook that say Toyota has the most electrified vehicles in their fleet, and that is true, but electrified vehicles are not fully electric. They mostly run on gas. And I think I was telling you a couple of weeks ago on the show, like I happened to catch a Toyota ad. I was watching TV. I don't normally watch TV. I cut the cord many, many years ago, but I saw a Toyota ad on TV and damn, it was convincing, you know, because it was the same kind of thing of, you know, electrified vehicles. And, you know, like we were talking about earlier, this is not a Sputnik moment for most people because most people, I think, see that kind of ad from Toyota and they're reassured because they already like Toyota. And, you know, oh, Toyota's electrifying. That seems good.
They've already got a reputation for hybrids. They've got 25 years of hybrid innovation. So people say, well, okay, I guess it's time to do something. I'll buy the Toyota because I've heard that they're, but they're not. They're 25 years old. They've done that. They did it well. You know, if you're going to buy a hybrid, buy a Toyota. But because everyone else makes hybrids, and people don't even, my brother-in-law doesn't think anyone but Toyota makes hybrids, so he's going to buy a Toyota, he says. So, yeah, it's just not the case. And this is from Preben in the United States. He says, I believe you can count on the uninformed believing that this makes Toyota part of the green future. Yes, that's exactly what you just said. Thought you might enjoy this. As the saying goes, misery loves company. Well, I think that people will, you know, see their neighbor have an electric car when they've got a Toyota hybrid, and they'll eventually realize, because every car ad, again, I'm starting to see now is electric for fully electric vehicles. And that's about the brands trying to, you know, make it seem like they're on top of this and on top of tech because people want to be green, but they don't want to spend money to do it. We love to hear from our listeners. Contact us at email address. That's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Drop everything you're doing and write us right now because we like to hear whatever you're thinking. You can also leave us a voicemail online at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. That's speakpipe, one word, .com, Clean Energy Show. And our podcast runs on support. You can also donate in your show notes. Check your show notes. Most people don't. There's lots of stuff in the show notes. I take time to make those show notes, man. People should be reading them.
Absolutely. All right, so moving on to a story from Bloomberg. This is kind of another bit of a downer story, but Berkeley, California, they were the first city in the U.S. to ban natural gas hookups at new buildings. And they did this many years ago. And unfortunately, they've now had to rescind that order because there's been a court case going since way back in 2019. The California Restaurant Association, they took the city of Berkeley to court way back when, arguing that they preferred cooking with gas. And of course, the ban was on new hookups in new buildings, but restaurants, chefs, restaurateurs, they're going to eventually want to maybe move to a new location. And under this rule, they would not be allowed to have natural gas. But yeah, this is very much the playbook of the California Restaurant Association. That's who's fighting this. Same thing happened basically with the smoking ban. So it was finally in the 1980s that the Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, warned that secondhand smoke was causing lung cancer in healthy non-smokers. So this is what led to smoking finally being banned in restaurants in the 80s and mostly in the 90s. And this was all fought in court in a very, very similar way. And of course, it was big tobacco that paid for it. And they even created the Beverly Hills Restaurant Association to fight it. Like this was an organization not started by the Beverly Hills restaurants, but started by tobacco companies.
Oh, man.
And they used this to fight these rules. And of course, it was successful for a few years in delaying the ban of smoking. I remember I lived in Toronto in 93, 94, and that's the first time they tried a smoking ban in restaurants in Toronto in either 93 or 94. And the first time it didn't take. Like, people just kept smoking in restaurants, and the owners of the restaurants, they were not willing to enforce it. So the city had to rescind the bylaw, and they said, okay, look, we're going to give up for now. But, then they passed another one that took place a couple of years later. And with a couple of years warning, they were able to make it stick.
Well, this is disgusting, though, when you think about it, because I mean, isn't it proven that, induction cooking works just as well as, or better in some cases, than gas cooking? Is a myth that gas cooking is the superior method? And is that just in their mindset?
Yeah, it certainly, and it's, years and years of history, of course. Like, natural gas has been the backbone of restaurants for decades and decades now. And I do love great restaurants, great chefs. I mean, these are artists.
Well, who doesn't?
In their own right. So I would hate to tell an artist what kind of paintbrush they have to use on their canvas. I mean, I do like the idea of chefs being able to do what they want, but no, there's really no need for it. Induction is faster. Not that that's the only criteria, but induction has been proven to be the best. But of course, yeah, especially if you're a chef who's been working for, 3 decades, you're probably not going to want to switch it's a whole different mindset. It does work differently. So you have to work differently. But so, yeah, this is unfortunate. This has now been defeated, and Berkeley had to rescind this bylaw. And part of the argument was just kind of a technicality in a way, because they argued that Berkeley shouldn't be able to ban natural gas like this because there's federal regulations that are already in place, and that, it's really that it's a federal thing. And so, but unfortunately this win can now, they can take this to other cities and other states who have, also had similar bans, and unfortunately probably win them. So they won't win in the long run, but this does delay things, and it's super unfortunate. And, not to mention the health aspects. Secondhand smoke, of course, does kill people. And, so does exposure to natural gas. I wouldn't want to be a chef or anybody working in a kitchen for decades and decades. The air quality would not be great in there.
No, I mean, you cook supper once a night at most at home, but they're constantly, if you're new to the show, we've done stories on this about air quality in homes. A lot of it has to do with leaky pipes, like those pipes, the gas. It's hard to keep gas in a sealed pipe. They leak out a little bit, even in small amounts, and it's not good for you. It's not good for the climate either.
No, so we'll continue to follow it, see what happens, but it's a delay for sure.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
The world's first large-scale grid battery installation went online only 7 years ago, Brian. Sometime next year, though, the global grid-connected battery storage capacity will exceed that of pumped hydro storage. So pumped hydro was the only way to really store it, and pumped hydro is when you pump water up on a hilltop or something, on a reservoir, and then let it come down and make hydro energy on the way down. It's difficult and not always easy to do.
Yeah, but it's a type of battery, really, because you can take excess power from, say, sun and wind during the day and use that to pump. And then, you let the water just come down with the force of gravity at night, and you can generate electricity all night. Or with your hydroelectric dam, you can just reduce how much power you're generating and let your dam reservoir build up. It's the same kind of thing. It's a type of battery. But with just 7 years of grid storage batteries, large containers with lithium-ion batteries, it's going to now surpass pumped hydro by next year.
And Tesla is rehiring some of its fired supercharger staff, starting with Max de Zegger, who was an executive under the previous head of supercharging, Rebecca Tanucci. This is not the first time Musk has had to backtrack an impetuous business decision. In 2019, he decided to close all of Tesla's retail locations to pay for a cheaper version of the Model 3 sedan. Do you remember that? That was like, what are you doing? And then like a couple months later, he reversed it, fortunately, or you wouldn't have a store to go to get your car fixed or to pick up your most recent Tesla. Within 2 weeks, that decision had been reversed. Oh, I just said 2 months. It's 2 weeks, in no small part due to the legal consequences of breaking so many leases. That's from Ars Technica. There's leases involved with these superchargers, too, from landowners and from utilities. This is from Teslarati. General Motors is investing $390 million in Kansas for its next generation Chevy Bolt EV. I own a Chevy Bolt. I'm looking forward to what they come up with next. Maybe I'll upgrade if I get the chance, because I know it's going to charge faster. That's the one problem with my car. That is a bit tight space-wise. I guess I could always lose weight, but who wants to do that? Last week, General Motors announced that it would end Chevy Malibu production. That's one of the last gas-powered sedans. Gas-powered sedans in North America, not a thing anymore.
Yeah, that's a rare thing.
Quietly disappeared. The Malibu has been in production since the 1960s, just like me and you, Brian. But GM has decided to shift its focus to crossover and sport utility vehicles and electric vehicles. I kind of like that. You know, my son, he's totally against SUVs. He thinks he has one for work sometimes. Completely, like the new generation doesn't really care. At least it seems that way. With some, I mean, half of the people he knows are buying trucks, but they're from the country. The city people are saying, that's excessive. Of course, he grew up with cars too. So what is the round-trip efficiency of California big batteries? That round-trip efficiency was what we talk about. We could apply that to pumped hydro, because you have to power a pump. You use excess solar, for example, in the daytime to power a pump to put the water up, and then the water comes back down and it turns a turbine. And how efficient is all that? Well, there's a round trip for batteries too, because you have to change it to DC and AC and go back and forth. It's 87%, which is actually pretty good. So
yeah, that seems great.
You lose about 13%. That's not too bad at all. It's time for a CES Fast Fact. Brazil is to come in third for global clean energy investment last year, now that we've tallied up the numbers. A lot of people wouldn't have picked Brazil. That's kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people. If you listen to the show, there were hints. There were hints on our show. It was there. But that's pretty amazing.
I would not have guessed that either.
Germany was after that. The U.S. was number 2. China, of course, is the graph has to be, it's just completely blown away. It's like it goes on forever. The Chinese.
The graph is comical. China is
yes, that's what I
just
was trying
way
to say.
ahead in clean energy investments.
Puerto Rico, the regulator there, approves 360 megawatt of plan to accelerate battery storage. So that's good for them. Batteries, good for hurricane-ravaged regions, Brian.
And yes, and we've talked about Puerto Rico before. Of course, they do have big problems with hurricanes and storms and knocking out the grid. And for several years now, they've been investing more in solar and batteries and trying to slowly fix that problem.
Solar, the cost per unit of watts was 18 cents a watt in 2023. This is for big grid projects, 18 cents per watt. But it's fallen to 10 cents a watt this May. That is like half the price in 1 year. People say, we're saying we did shows where we said, analysts say it can't go any further. Well, it halved in 1 year. I mean, the solar companies are going out of business. It's really cutthroat, and
that's a bit of an issue.
It's a bit of an issue. So they say there's no room. There's no room to go any further. And I actually believe them. Renewables worldwide have passed 30% of electricity supply. So that's something to keep an eye on. 30%. We're there. When we started the show, I don't know what it was, but it was a lot lower 4 years ago. Oh, it's time for some legal news, Brian, if you don't mind.
If this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the chair.
Exxon is ordered to pay $725.5 million to a mechanic who said its products, that's Exxon's products, exposed him to cancer-causing benzene. The jury found that the oil company failed to warn Paul Gill of the risk of benzene in its products, including gasoline and solvents, while he worked as a mobile service station mechanic from 1975 to 1980. Only 5 years of exposure. This isn't a lifetime. This is 5 years, and he won the case. That's pretty cool. His attorney said in a statement Friday. So that is... I'm kind of amazed by that, because 5 years of exposure doesn't seem like a lifetime of exposure, and that seems like a long shot. But they didn't talk about the benzene.
Yeah, well, we have a similar local story here. There was a man who passed away recently from cancer, and he and his family were suing Sask Energy, our local natural gas provider, because he had worked for decades, 2 or 3 decades for Sask Power, and they filed a lawsuit and said that his cancer was caused by the same thing, benzene. And I don't think it ended as nicely with a win like that. But this is one of the things that's going to be happening more and more. Or, maybe it'll happen in restaurants, right? Like
I was thinking the same thing. Maybe the chefs, 30 years from now or 20 years from now or 10 years from now or tomorrow will be suing because even though the restaurants themselves are pushing back against it. But all it takes is one lawsuit and, the dominoes start to fall, don't they? That can happen. In more legal news, Michigan plans to sue fossil fuel companies for deceiving the public about their products' role in climate change. Michigan would become the 9th state to take on big oil in court. I love to see that. It's one of my favorite things of the show because it gives me hope. California's lowest solar generation in winter, January that is now higher than its highest summer values were in 2016. So this winter, they had more solar at their worst time of year than they had at their best time of year in 2016. That's another similar story. And finally this week, solar wind is completely replacing diesel at the South Pole. Because, this is from PV Magazine, you got to have some energy down there. Where do you get it from? And it's a bit of a pain, I imagine, to fly in some diesel to keep those generators running. And I hate to be the guy who has to go out and fix it in a blizzard. Scientists from the U.S. Department of Energy's Argonne National Laboratory and National Renewable Energy Laboratory looked into whether they could use renewable energy to power the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station in Antarctica. The station, where scientists study climate change and space, currently relies on non-renewable fuels to run its equipment and keep everyone warm. Very important. Amy Bender, a physicist at Argonne, explained, right now the South Pole gets all its energy from diesel fuel and a generator. We wanted to see if we could switch to renewable energy instead. This study is the first step in making that happen. The research explores using solar panels, wind turbines, and special batteries to store energy. By combining these technologies, they found they could provide enough power for the station while reducing the need for diesel by 95%, virtually eliminating it. This could save a lot of money, too, and help the environment. They estimated it would take about 2 years for the new system to pay for itself and eventually save millions of dollars over 15 years of its lifetime. And that's what we like to hear. That's the theme of our show. Cleaner, better, cheaper.
Fantastic. And that is our show for this week. If you want to contact us, it's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Around social media, we are Clean Energy Pod, and you can find videos of the show on TikTok, YouTube, occasionally special content not even featured on the podcast.
Can you see the pictures I posted?
Yes, it's James has some beautiful
aren't they pretty?
photos of the Northern Lights. You can look for those on our social media.
And probably won't see them again because smoke. Next time this happens, it'll probably be winter. The store, we have a Clean Energy store, listeners. It's there, hats, T-shirts, mugs, all kinds of things if you care to support the show. And Sunshine, I think we're still running that promotion. The word Sunshine will get you $5 off. Rate and review us on Apple or wherever you're listening to the show. That helps us. Donate with PayPal on your show notes there. If you're new to the show, welcome. Thanks for listening. We welcome you on our journey. This is pretty exciting for us. And we ask you to remember to subscribe on your podcast app or wherever you're listening to us so that you get the new shows. Because we do this every week. We'll see you next time.
See you next week.
The Clean Energy Show.